Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. Welcome to our immigration roundup in English, where we share with you information on immigration updates from Lincoln-Goldfinch Law in the English language. We do so many videos in Spanish, and we wanted to make sure to cover all of this stuff for our English speakers. I'm coming to you from Puerto Vallarta. We're on spring break, and so I'm giving you a little bit of the balcony view. We've been whale watching from our balcony, which has been super cool. And Pobre Fidel is stuck in Austin. But if you watched his live video about his advanced parole experience, you'll know that he was recently here in this exact same spot, and he talked all about it. So, hey Fidel, how you doing?
That's I'm doing good. I'm a little bit jealous, getting FOMO, but now even more because I know what it feels like to be there, and I want to be there with you, but soon again, hopefully.
That's right.
Cool. So today's roundup, we're gonna talk about just a mission rescue that Kate had. I'll tell you a little bit more details about that, but as always, you can ask us your questions live here in the comments. You can also give us some reactions so that we can give you shout outs, because that's the way I can see your names. So I can give you shout outs with the reactions. You can also send us a direct message, call us, any way that you want to communicate with us. We can help you with immigration or bankruptcy matters. All of our lines are secure and confidential so that you can have privacy during your call. The phone number for that is right here below. So it's 855-502-0555. It's a lot of fives. But there we go. So the information provided in this video is general. It doesn't relate to any particular case. So we're just going to talk in general terms. If you do have any specific questions, you can put them here in the comments, or you can also call us, like I mentioned, so we can answer that live. But any of this information can also change, so make sure to stay updated with our lives that we're going to be doing. And then in Spanish, we do them more frequently, so any new information is updated there. Yeah, so Kate, what do you say we get started with today's rescue mission that you did? So can you tell us a little bit more about that and what this was?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of this show is to help all the people who know someone from Ukraine. Like you have a family member or a friend or a relative and you're wondering what you can do to help them. So that's what we're here to talk about for people who are still stuck in Ukraine, for people who have fled and they're maybe in Poland or Romania, or maybe they're seeking asylum at the border or they're already in the United States. So wherever they are, if they're trying to come to the United States, there's different, current policies and rules that are applying to people. And so ask us your questions. We've gotten so many inquiries. I can't tell you how many posts on Facebook I have been tagged on. Hey, Kate, can you help? So part of this video is to sort of give everybody else this information because I know all of us probably know someone who knows someone from Ukraine. So we want to be able to get you the information you need to help guide them. But you know, the big news that we had last week was that our law firm was involved in a case that most people already heard about because it was all over the news last week because it was like the one good news story coming out of the war in Ukraine, which is such a tragedy, just such an awful, horrific thing that is happening. And it's, all of us are just like blasted with bad news, upsetting news. And so this one good thing happened. And so everybody was talking about it. And so we had the honor of being involved in the case of the twin babies who were evacuated from Kyiv, Ukraine. And so the story of that case is that I was tagged in a Facebook post where a friend of the family said, I need some help for my friends who had twin babies born early via surrogate in Ukraine, and they're at a hospital in Kyiv, and we need help. These are U.S. citizen, American babies, and we need to get them out of the country. And number one, get them safe out of Ukraine, and number two, work on getting them their U.S. citizenship. And so I immediately, once I was talking to the parents, I realized that, lots of I serve on the board of VECINA, which means neighbor in Spanish. And this is an organization that I helped found with my good friend Lindsay Gray, who is the CEO of the organization. Essentially, what VECINA does is legal services for immigrants in crisis. And so we worked on border cases, we worked on Afghanistan cases, we worked on kids in detention, and just it's like wherever the emergency is, VECINA gets involved, is typically the way that works. And so because VECINA has been doing work in Afghanistan, I knew that Lindsay would have some good contacts in the Department of State and, in evacuations. And sure enough, I was right. So Lindsay and I began to co-counsel on the case, and we were able to get the family connected to Project Dynamo, who are the true heroes in this case. They actually got all the supplies they needed for these babies, the travel incubators, the right food, the ambulance, the neonatologists. I mean, they gathered all these things. It was a global effort. There were people involved all over the world. And they went in and got those babies and drove them to Poland last Wednesday. It was a week ago today. And what a nail biter it was, but it's an amazing outcome because the babies are fine. The babies are healthy and they're doing great. It's been amazing.
That's awesome. It's amazing to hear how we can change the situation there from just being over here. And can you tell us a little bit more about that? What specifically was your role being here in the US and being involved in this whole mission?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I am not an expert in medical evacuations in war times. And, there were moments where I was like, I am way out of my depth here. Thank God the Project Dynamo people are there and they know what they're doing. But a lot of it was faith. I mean, obviously on the part of the parents, but me too. It's hoping that these people have it handled, and these parents had to make this decision of these babies are little. They're not ready to travel, but do you move them sooner than they would otherwise travel to get them out of a war zone, and they did, and it all turned out. So the question was, what was our involvement? Essentially, for the evacuation, our involvement was making connections. Lindsay and I were able to help get them connected to the people who actually accomplished the heroic mission of the evacuation. We were just sitting in our houses, the day of the evacuation was hours long. It was 10 hours, and I was trying to focus on work stuff, but it was really difficult. And I kept thinking about the parents. I mean, they've been so amazingly strong. But anyway, these babies are this. It's an immigration case too, because babies born via surrogate acquire U.S. citizenship, and this is maybe relevant to the topic at hand. If anybody knows, a family with babies who are in the adoption process, or they're born via surrogate, or they're born, to U.S. citizen parents, but are born abroad in Ukraine, they are U.S. citizens, but there are very different procedures for each type of case. But there's a whole body of law and policy on ART, or I think it stands for assisted reproductive technology, like surrogacy, to acquire, to pass U.S. citizenship to children. So that's, our role in the case. And so getting these babies their citizenship and getting them over to the United States, once it's safe to do that.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, that now how you can just oversee the whole thing and just make sure that the babies are safely, because as you said, they are U.S. citizens. So looking back at this whole experience that happened, what was the most difficult part of the rescue mission?
Well, I don't want to speak for the rescuers, but from my perspective, it was the fragility of the babies. There were these two twins. Lenny and Moishe are the twins. They're boys, and they were born at 32 weeks, and they were on incubators, and they were on feeding tubes, and they were in the NICU. And then there was another little baby girl, Sophia, who's even smaller, even more fragile. I think she's British. I think her parents are British, but I don't know them. And so Project Dynamo was going in to get Lenny and Moishe and baby Sophia from another hospital. They were in two different hospitals in Kyiv. And so, like I said, they had to find all of the supplies that they needed, like the little incubators and the exact right food, and get the medical professionals who are willing to go on this like extremely dangerous mission and drive these ambulance into these hospitals, get the babies and drive them hours through Ukraine, into Poland. So I think it was I would want Project Dynamo to answer this, but I've seen Brian from Project Dynamo give enough interviews at this point that he said multiple times, this is the most complex mission I have ever done in Project Dynamo because of the fragility of these babies. So that was the thing. It was like, are these babies going to be able to make this journey when they are so teeny? But for Lenny and Moishe, they were able to like get out of the NICU the day after they arrived in Poland. I mean, they just continue to thrive. And I keep thinking about like these babies and their story and what, I thought like, what a life these little boys, these people are going to have. If this is their origin story. Can you imagine if this was your origin story in your life? Like, you better have a badass, powerful life after you start out like this. But I think they will after I've gotten to know the parents. It's an amazing family, and it was such an honor to be able to be involved in that case, and to have it turn out the way that it did. It's just been miraculous, But like, my part in the evacuation was this small, It's not my area, and it's like, I saw in an interview with Brian from Project Dynamo, one of the reporters asked him, like, why would you do this? Like, why would you drive into a war zone? I mean, he's former military, so he's been in war before. And he's just like, he was sitting next to Sasha, the dad, and he's like, I'm looking at Sasha, and he's asking me to help him save his babies. And what am I going to say? No. It's just like, what a hero, what a hero. So cool.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the whole firm was involved that day because just at least like behind the scenes, like you were keeping us all updated, and it was kind of like, oh, where are the babies now? Like, what's going on? Like we all wanted to know, and I still remember that day. And I feel like with all the media coverage and everything that's happening, I'm like, these babies will, when they grow up, they're gonna be able to come back to these all this coverage that is being documented essentially. So I really do hope that they come back and read this, like you said, because it's a pretty great story for sure. Okay, so I have another
scrapbook
question.
material.
Yeah.
Talk about a scrapbook.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this is a little bit kind of like moving us a little bit more into like world topics with TPS and like all of that because they announced TPS for Ukraine. So now it seems that the US government was very quick to act to aid Ukrainians. How come we see this swiftness for Ukraine, but not for other countries such as Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and then Afghanistan, which now they have TPS, but it took a while?
I think we all suspect why we haven't seen the same quick action for Afghans, for Central Americans, Haitians, as we have seen for people from Ukraine. Maybe it's political solidarity. Maybe it's racial solidarity. I don't want to use this word solidarity. Maybe it's race-based motivation, which is awful. It's not something that feels okay. And it bothers me, as it should bother all of us, that Central American asylum seekers who have been fleeing legitimate like war in their country. Maybe it's not Russian invasion, but gangs and their governments are battling for control of these nations, and there are casualties, and there are children. And I think that we as a nation have completely failed to take care of our neighboring, refugees from Central America, who are fleeing legitimate violence. And the Trump administration implemented policies like the migrant protection protocols and PP, like Title 42, COVID security, closure of the border completely. that Biden has not successfully reversed yet is a travesty. It is such a disappointment of this administration, and I will say that publicly. Like, it is not okay. It is not okay the way that we have failed to take care of migrants in crisis on from the southern border. And we've worked on cases. We've had public cases. I'm thinking of the case we had in Time Magazine last year of the single mother from El Salvador and her 8-year-old daughter who tried to seek asylum, and they were turned away and they were kidnapped. And the daughter got escaped, and she made it over because only kids were allowed over, not families, not parents. And she was in detention and chickenpox quarantine for weeks, thinking her mother had died because of the violence of the kidnapping. And like, that never would have happened if we didn't have Title 42 in place. So it's like, it's not okay. And I think at this moment, what's most productive and what's most useful is to say, okay, maybe the administration, some of the American public are motivated to be more generous with our immigration humanitarian policies because of what is happening in Ukraine, and we should um, take care of people from Ukraine who are seeking asylum, just as we should take care of people from Afghanistan, just as we should take care of people from Honduras. But if this is the thing, if the crisis in the war in Ukraine is what finally moves the needle and gets the policies back to where they should be in terms of asylum seekers, then that is a blessing. That is a good thing, and I hope that's what we see. And so, for example, I was on, a news station earlier this week complaining that we had TPS for Ukraine announced like that, and we can talk about what TPS is, but we still didn't have TPS for Afghanistan. Like, how does that reconcile? But then today or yesterday, TPS for Afghanistan was announced. And so I don't know why it was announced. Maybe it was because it was like, hey, this is a match. And so if that's what got TPS for Afghanistan accomplished, then good. It should have been, And so I think it's like, what's useful in these moments, from my perspective, is to focus on what can be done, what can be accomplished to get us back to who we are as a country. It's like, I talk about this all the time when I give presentations on asylum. Like, why do we do asylum? We do asylum because we failed. We were part of the international failure to protect Jewish refugees in the Holocaust. We turned them back to their death. And after that, we, changed. We changed. We said, we're not going to do that again. Like, we have a responsibility as a nation to protect people who are fleeing persecution. And we signed international treaties, and we put asylum into our own laws and our policies, and we've had it in place for 70 years. And during the Trump administration, all that just got chucked over the balcony. And it takes a lot of work and effort to get us back to where we were, and I haven't seen that happen. And so now, if we're going to do that, if we're going to get that done, and Ukraine is the motivator for that, then I say I'm glad that we're getting there. I'm obviously not glad about what's happening in Ukraine, but I'm glad to see that maybe our nation is finally getting back to the values that I think most of us believe in and stand for. Soapbox.
Yeah. I'm like, there's so much more we can uncover there.
But I was like, that wasn't in the list of Q&A.
No. I mean, there's so much more, because personally, like, I work here. I've worked here almost 6 years now, but asylum is still a topic that I don't know much about. So there's definitely a lot more that I would want to know. For example, a question of mine is, what does a nation that help other people, what does that look in terms of like the regulations with asylum and like all of that in your mind or your perspective?
Well, I think people have this fear that's like, oh, we're going to be overrun, or we can't handle immigration, or we need to like figure out how many people we can take and limit to that. And I think that then gets us into this whole conversation about immigration overall. It's like, I have a belief. I believe in orderly immigration. I believe that we have to have policies about borders. I also believe that we have an aging population and the diversity and foreign mixing is what makes this country great. And so I think that, there people can obviously different opinion about like how many immigrants we want as a starting point, but that's related to but separate from our responsibility to protect refugees who are fleeing persecution. And that, I think, just goes down to like a fundamental question of humanity. Like, are you the person who is in the water after the Titanic has sunk and your lifeboat feels full to you and you're shoving people back down into the water? Or are you the person who's pulling people up out of the water? Are you that person in your life, or aren't you? That's what it comes down to, I think. And it's like we can equate Ukrainian refugees fleeing into Romania, fleeing into Poland, to Central American refugees coming into the United States. So obviously the circumstances are somewhat different, but it's like if you feel if someone watching, I think most of the people who watch us are like pretty pro immigration, but if someone watching this is on the fence or trying to like conceptualize all of this, how would you feel if Poland shut their borders to Ukraine right now and said, no, we're not taking any? Would you think that that was not cool? Then why is it okay for us to do the same thing with Central Americans? What is that distinction for you? They are both fleeing real and actual violence. So just something to consider,
For sure, for sure. I'll keep that in mind and think about it as well, for sure. Okay, so moving on to TPS, because we mentioned now this temporary protected status. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it is, this program that has been going on for a while now? Can you just explain a little bit more about that?
Okay, TPS is temporary protected status. It's a provision in the U.S. immigration laws, and it helps the people who are in the United States when something happens in their country. So Hurricane Mitch in Honduras back in the 90s, the earthquake in Haiti, the Ebola outbreak in Liberia. When these sorts of infrastructure collapses happen in a country, the U.S. will announce TPS for everyone from that country who was already in the United States on a certain date. It is not a way for people who are abroad to get here. Okay, so we're only talking in terms of TPS for Ukraine about Ukrainians who are already in the United States. But what it does is it says, we're not going to deport you. We're going to give you work permission. We're going to give you the means to get a driver's license and to stay in the United States and live and work here safely, because we recognize you can't go back to your home country. And so typically the TPS designations will last for about 18 months, 12 to 18 months. And then their redesignation will happen. Sometimes it goes on for years and years and years, like we saw for Honduras and El Salvador in the late 90s and early 2000s. And sometimes it ends pretty quickly, like the Liberian Ebola outbreak. Once that was done, the TPS designation ended, and then presumably those people, return home because they lose their legal status in the U.S. So for people who know a Ukrainian, person in the United States who was here before March 1st of this year, so just 2 weeks ago, they can apply for a TPS designation and stay here for 18 months. And the same is true now for Afghans who were here. I think the designation is, as of yesterday, March 15th. So any Afghans who are already here by March 15th can apply for TPS and stay here, which is good. It's good. But it's also, there were some, pending legislation to assist Afghans with permanent status who are in the United States, and TPS may take a little bit of the wind out of those sails, or the urgency out of that legislation. So we'll see the outcome of that. But TPS is almost always a good thing, and we do need to see really quick action on that.
I think this also kind of like proves the disconnect between the different branches, because it's like, if I'm not mistaken, like it's like TPS is an executive action, which the president can do, but then there's a lot of people that are stuck in this status. It's like they're living here, paying taxes, working legally, but it's like that's all we get essentially. And I feel it feels very similar to DACA for me. For example, it's like it's a temporary thing that I mean, TPS is even less reliable, I feel like, because you have to wait for it to be redesignated and announced by the, all of that process to feel the security that it's going to go on for another 18 months. But it's like just the disconnect between the different branches and also the need for something permanent, to a permanent solution to the immigration problem that we have.
Totally. I mean, you know, one of the reasons that immigration is so important, other than we are aging, we need immigrant labor. Immigrants but a much bigger like percentage, start businesses and create jobs in the United States, and they're a benefit to our economy. But if you think about the things, like as you live your life, the things that you do to make plans to start a business, to hire an employee, to buy a house, to get married, to have children, to do all of the things that establish a secure and permanent life in a place, you're not going to do those things. Or most people aren't going to do those things unless they have more security in their status. And so it's like we're bringing all these amazing people over who have so much potential, and then it's almost like, it's like they're trying to run and we're holding onto their shirts, and it's like it just is, it's so um, bad for all of us. And I think, one of the things that's true is that the vast majority of Americans, do believe in immigration, right? And so many people may not understand the system and what that means, and like they may say things like get in line, and they may not understand how bad our system is, in terms of not supporting the needs of our nation and our economy. But I think immigration isn't the divisive topic that the media, and that's, um, politicians like Greg Abbott, Ken Paxton make it out, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump. It's like we can't boost this video. You can't boost Facebook videos where you say political speech, and obviously this is not one we can boost. But that is all rhetoric, and it doesn't reflect what all of us Americans, not even citizens, like I'm including immigrants when I say Americans, like the people who live in this country, what we believe actually, I think, is pretty much in alignment. And then we've got all this, from divisiveness that isn't real. It's not true. It doesn't support what we really want. And so it's like, my hope, we're getting much broader than Ukraine, but my hope is that like we get all of that noise out of the sphere and actually get some real reform achieved, soon, because this is just, it's not working. It's just not working what we've been doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. So going back a little bit more to Ukraine and the situation at hand. So we already covered TPS for those that were here already. How about the ones that are arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border to seek asylum? Is that something that they can even do with our current asylum regulations? How does that work?
No, they cannot. And this again is one of those things where this might be the thing that changes the policy. So during the Trump administration, Title 42 was implemented. Title 42 says we don't allow any asylum seekers because of COVID. And obviously that was like pre-vaccine, pre-COVID test availability. Now it just doesn't make any sense to have a rule like that, but the policy is still in place. The only people it doesn't apply to is children who are unaccompanied, who are alone, which is a whole other problematic issue. But no, Ukrainian asylum seekers who arrive at the border are being turned away, just like all other asylum seekers, and it's a travesty. It's not okay. It needs to change. And it's really, really bad for migrants in Mexico. The cartels just very regularly kidnap migrants in Mexico. So it's really dangerous. This is something I want to make sure anybody watching who has a relative or a friend in Ukraine who's considering flying in to South or Central America and traveling up and coming to the border, don't do that. it's dangerous. It's very dangerous right now for any migrant, any asylum seeker in Mexico. 50%, they did a report recently, or I think it was a VECINA report, 50% of the migrants that we had helped had been subject to kidnapping or attempted kidnapping. It is like that regular. And so it's not a good idea for Ukrainian asylum seekers to come to the border and ask for asylum in this moment, until things settle out in Mexico. And so really the truth is that Ukrainians who don't already have a way to a visa to come to the United States can't right now, absent like some sort of total medical emergency. Like let's say somebody is in, Warsaw, Poland. They don't have a visa. They're Ukrainian, and they have like a life-changing surgery that can only be done in the United States. Well, there might be an emergency visa for some, but it has to be like that extreme. Otherwise, and this is the most common inquiry I'm getting right now from people is like, oh, it's like, oh, my parents are in Poland. They never are Ukraine. They never wanted to immigrate. They were super fine in Ukraine, and now they're in Romania. What do I do? Well, here's the deal. They can't come and seek asylum. You can't come to the border and seek asylum. You can petition for parents to get a green card, but that process is going to take a year. So my message to people in the United States who have loved ones from Ukraine who want to get to the United States, but they don't already have a visa, right now you should focus on getting them comfortable and safe where they are. Get them a nice apartment, get them plenty of food for groceries, get them settled and safe, because it's gonna be a while. There's no way to like immediately bring over people from Ukraine. The family petitions already were taking at least a year, and now imagine how overwhelmed the embassy officials are. So I know that's not the answer that most people want to hear, but that's the reality. What you need to do is get them safe and comfortable where they are. And then, I highly doubt that we're going to see some sort of mass humanitarian parole or invitation to bring Ukrainians to the United States. That just doesn't happen. But there are ways to do, visa applications, family petitions, employment visa options for someone who wants to transfer in, or they're highly skilled or talented person that could be employed by a U.S. company. And that's just regular old immigration that we discuss with people. But right now, there's so much wheel spinning for people who, like, understandably, they're like, my mom is, a refugee in Romania. What the heck can I do? Give her everything she needs to live safely in Romania, at least for a little while, and then give us a call and we'll discuss, immigration options. But everybody needs to understand that is not going to be immediate, unfortunately.
Awesome. And you answered my last question about what can people do to help those in the situation where they're somewhere else and want to come to the US, but you just covered that. So I do want to give shout outs before we sign off to Daniel Aguirre, who joined us, and then also Stacy Brown, who joined us as well, Yunuen Alvarado, and Gloria Gutierrez. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope this conversation was useful, and there's a lot of useful information. So please, especially that last part of Kate, talking about what can you do to help your loved ones and your friends and family abroad. So please share it with everybody that you know that may need this information. Kate, anything else that you would like to share before we sign off? Or any highlights?
I think we covered it. I know that there's also people who want to do something and they don't know someone from Ukraine, but they want to donate. So maybe one of the things we can work on at the firm is like a list of our top, 5 organizations that could use donation help. If you guys want to just do something, feel like you're doing something, we'll work on finding some good places that could use your money well, and we'll let you know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I hope everybody has a good rest of your week. And sign on. How often are we doing these videos, Kate, in English?
These are every other Wednesday, so we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
Bye, guys.